Years ago, when I was 55 years old, I was standing in front of a bathroom mirror next to my 4-year-old grandson, Clayton. And he was waiting for me to get done so that we could go play. And I'm fussing around. And he says, "Grandma, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting on makeup, honey. It makes my face look better." And I keep working it. And he keeps looking at me for about 30 more seconds. And he says, "Grandma, when does it start working?" Go away. So I threw the makeup in the bag. I said, "You know what? You're right, honey. Let's go." It wasn't exactly an epiphany, but it was a shock to the system. And I was spending much of the day thinking, so why do I put on makeup, right? Why do I? Well, part of it is I don't want to volunteer to be invisible. I was starting to think about that a lot more. I was sitting in a doctor's office a couple months ago waiting for an appointment, and I'm sitting on my smartphone, and I'm going through Facebook posts, and I see this story that a friend shared about nail polish tips for women over 50. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And so I thought, oh, do tell. So I hit it. And apparently, after the age of 50, women are not supposed to wear any bright colors on their fingernails. We're supposed to wear very neutral colors because if we don't, we're going to draw attention to our hands, which are going to give away our age. So the roadmap of lines on my face, you are going to go right past those. All those gray hairs waving like sea oats from my hairline. You weren't going to see those. They weren't going to be. It was going to be my hands. My hands were going to tip you off. Well, my attitude is this. If my hands are going to telegraph something about me, I'm going to wear the brightest color I can. So today I chose purple. Young women often tell me that my generation of women aren't mentoring enough of them, and I know they're right. My sisters, we must carry as we climb. And the way I look at it is this. We don't have their midriffs, and they don't have our wisdom. And apparently it was a trade-off nobody told us about. And so they also don't have our hands. And if our hands are an emblem for us, I say go with the brightest color we can, right? Let's let people know what they're getting into when they cross paths with us. The trajectory of my career was never a straight line. It was more like popcorn in a hot skillet. I got my first full-time job as a reporter when I was 36 years old. That's me at the Plain Dealer. I was scared out of my mind. I was joining a newsroom of more than 400 veteran journalists, and I had been a freelancer up to the moment when I got hired. 3 months into it, I became a single mother. Fun, fun, fun. That's Andy, and that's Caitlin, my son and my daughter. So about 3-4 weeks even, I don't think it was very long when I was working there, when I got assigned to cover a story about a 9-year-old boy named Joey, who was attacked and mauled by a Rottweiler because he had tried to protect a friend from being attacked. I showed up at the hospital in an attempt to interview the mother and the child, and I used my mommy credentials. I had a daughter who was 1 year younger than he at the time. And I'll never forget getting off the elevator in that hospital, on that floor, and I'm watching this woman, this mother. She's walking around like this, and she's holding up this picture. She's saying, "This is what my Joey looked like. This is what my Joey looked like before that dog bit him." And when I rounded the corner and went into his hospital room, I understood why she was doing that. He looked like a little mummy. His face was completely covered in bandages, and he was holding a stuffed bunny. And during the, so I was interviewing him when we talked about the bunny. And I go back into the newsroom, and I file my story, and shortly after that, we used to call it the super collider in the newsroom where all the editors sat. And I heard one male editor say to another male editor, "How did she know the name of the bunny?" And in that moment, so much relief washed over me, and I realized I was going to be just fine. Every minute that I had lived before I got into that newsroom was job experience. And every mother knows that a stuffed bunny has a name. At age 45, I got my dream job. I became a newspaper columnist at the Plain Dealer. My mom was already gone, but my dad was still living, and I called him at his home in Ashtabula, and I said, Dad, I'm going to be a columnist. And he said, he didn't miss a beat. Finally, after 45 years of giving your opinion away for free, you're going to get paid. Translation, so proud of you, honey. When you are a woman paid to give her opinion, you bring out the worst in a certain small percentage of men. I am proud to say. My favorite reader letter ever, exchange actually with a male reader, came from a man in Alabama during the 2012 presidential primary. Now, as it was at that time, I was also writing personal essays for Parade magazine, and many papers ran both at the same time. So there he is in Alabama, minding his own business, and my personal essay shows up in Parade on the same day that my political column shows up on the op-ed page. And his letter started, his email, "Madam, I do not understand how a woman who can be so sweet to her puppy can be so mean to Rick Santorum." So I wrote him back, and I said, well, you know, we women, we are complicated creatures. We can hold more than one thought at a time in our heads. And he wrote back with one sentence, well, now you're starting to sound like my wife. The hate mail was fast and furious, but so was the support. And it was overwhelmingly from women. And early in my career, I started to notice a trend that lasted the entire time I was at the Plain Dealer. I'm syndicated now, but I still had a phone number at the Plain Dealer. And so many women, most of them my age or older, would call after hours. So they were hoping they wouldn't get me live at my desk, right? They wanted to leave a voicemail message. And I could tell that so many of them were nervous, so nervous, even if they were agreeing with me, that they were reading their response to me. They had written it out before they called. Often, early in my career, when I was giving speeches as a columnist, if the audience was full of women and we had Q&A, inevitably, one woman would stand up and raise her hand or come to the microphone and, in essence, ask, doesn't all this hateful response bother you? And at first, I used to say, oh, no, it doesn't bother me. Well, there were two things wrong with that answer. First of all, it wasn't true. It did bother me. I mean, they even went after my pug, and how hard is the life of a pug to begin with? So it wasn't true. The truth was, yes, it often bothered me, but I didn't let it stop me. But the other thing that was even more important, I realized, is if I tried to hold myself up as somebody who wasn't affected by any of this, how was I ever going to hope to encourage any other women to speak their minds? I wanted them to know. I wanted to close that distance so fast and help them understand, I'm just like you. I just get paid to do this. And shortly after I started writing a column, I met Sherrod Brown. Because my life wasn't complicated enough as a single mother and a columnist, I decided to date a member of Congress. We were longtime single parents who thought we would never get married again until we laid eyes on each other, and I fell hard. There was one snag in the plan, however. I had vowed to myself after a very difficult first marriage and a tough divorce and then being on my own for a decade, I was never going to depend on a man for anything again. Sherrod had other plans. About 3 months into our dating life, in 2003, he offered one morning to make me coffee. He just said very matter-of-factly, I'm going to go make your coffee. And I immediately got up from the table and said, no, 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 no. I can do it. I can make my own coffee. Thank you. I'm fully capable of making my own coffee. Slowly, he turned. And he looked at me and he said, honey, we got to talk. So we sat down at the kitchen table, and he grabbed my hand, and he leaned in and said, honey, you are not going to lose your right to vote or your right to own property if you let me make your coffee. We were married 11 months later. I kept my name. Sherrod kept his name. Everybody seemed fine with that until he decided to run for the Senate in 2006. And suddenly, total strangers, mostly men, would come up to me and I'd say, hi, I'm Connie Schultz. And they'd grab my hand and they'd say, yes, I know, and you should change your name. I was rather stunned by that at first, for the first 400 times. But I finally figured out the right response. I simply said, but I've always been called Connie. I was on the brink of 50 years old, and something was coming over me. I realized I did not want to become invisible. More importantly, I think, thinking of the history of women, and even in my own life, I did not want to become like so many women in my mother's generation. My friend Karin Sandstrom put it so succinctly the other day to me. She said, you know, I think most of the women in our mom's generation, they greeted age 50 with either relief or resignation because nothing more was expected of them. I remember in the last weeks of my mother's life, as I said, she died at age 62. We were in a car, I was driving, and I was taking her to the doctor's office. And I was so full of emotion because I knew she didn't have much longer. And I said, Ma, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm so full of opinions all the time. I'm constantly expressing them. Everybody's getting upset with me. And she grabbed my hand and she said, honey, you're who I wanted to be. Remember this, the Newsweek cover? Oh, what fun. 1986. It told us women if we weren't married by the age of 40, we were going to be doomed to a lifetime of single-serving lean cuisines and screw-top wine before it was cool. It got debunked long ago, but oh, wasn't that anxiety fun. When I see things like that, when I recall it, I think of a quotation from the Black poet Lucille Clifton that has hung by my desktop for more than 15 years. She said it in an interview with the Plain Dealer. She said, what they call you is one thing. What you answer to is something else. I am so lucky. All of my adult life, I have had women in my life who not only believe it is important never for us to be invisible at any age, but who support other women, including me. And all of them live in the Cleveland area here, which is my community. That's Buffy Philippel, and we're in our early 30s. I have no idea why we are arm wrestling, but I'm sure I lost. I always did. Buffy had already founded her own company, Teamwork Consulting, after the company she had been working for told her she couldn't specialize in sports searches. And I was a freelance writer. And one day, Buffy showed up at my house, and her arms are full of boxes, and she's banging on my kitchen door. I'm looking at it, and I open the door, and she lays them out all on the counter. And she says, look at them. And I open them, and I see letterhead with my name and my contact information. And I see envelopes, and I see business cards, and all of them have the same job title, writer. And she said, now, I'm taking your career seriously. How about you? That's Gailey McCracken. I was a writer. Gailey was an artist. We were both stay-at-home moms giving away our work for free. In this picture, we are working on the first letter of the new Cleveland Children's Museum, and we were at a laundromat because my washer had broken. When Gailey was in her early 40s, right around 40, she said to me that her dream had always been to become a doctor. I said, let's do it. And she said, the only problem, Con, is I'm going to be 50 by the time I'm a doctor. And I said, well, you're going to be 50 anyway. You may as well be 50 and a doctor. That's Dr. Gailey McCracken. Karin Sandstrom was a colleague of mine at the Plain Dealer as a writer and as an editor and then back as a writer. And in her late 40s, she decided to pursue her dream. She wanted to be an artist. And she went to art school. And she graduated from art school, and now she's working on her first illustrated children's book. When I talked to her last week about how do you do this? How do you not let the negative, those voices in your head? And she says, you know what? When I sit down at a computer or at my sketch pad, I'm not 55. I'm just a woman with something to say. Evelyn Santiago, another colleague at the Plain Dealer and a dear friend. Merlene was part of the layoffs at the Plain Dealer, the big wave of layoffs, and she was 50 years old. And she told me recently that one of the things she kept telling herself in the beginning is, my God, I'm 50 years old. I'm a 50-year-old black woman with a Hispanic surname and no college education. Who's going to want me? Cleveland City Schools, as it turns out. She works with children at risk, and she starts every morning with a 30-minute dance session. She would be really embarrassed by my dance. She does it much better. And she's going to graduate from college in May. She told me one of the things that keeps her going is she remembers that the flowers in our garden do not bloom at the same time. That's Jackie Kucera. Nothing but trouble. Lucky me. One of my favorite stories about Jackie is on my first date with Sherrod on January 1st, 2003. I was so scared to meet him that I pulled into the parking lot. It was snowing out, it's cold, and I called her on the phone, and I said, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can go in there and meet him. She goes, oh, you're nervous. And I said, yeah. She goes, you're afraid this could be it? And I said, yes. She says, and you're just not sure you can do it? And I said, no. And she goes, all right, listen to me, honey. You turn off the car, you get your rear end out of the car, and you get into that restaurant. And I did. Jackie has been in real estate for 30 years. At age 62, she became vice president of education for Howard Hanna. This is Jackie's wife, Kate Matthews. She married Sherrod and me, Pastor Kate. Kate decided in her late 30s that what she really wanted to do was go to seminary. At age 62, she became dean of Amistad Chapel, downtown here at UCC headquarters. When I think of Kate, I think of how often she has insisted on introducing me to my higher angels. And then, I feel emotional even seeing her face because I know she's in the audience today. This is Sue Cline. I have known Sue Cline for so many years. For 29 and a half years, she worked for the same company. She was one of those secretaries who didn't fit the title because most people just referred to her as the boss of them. And when she was almost 50, she decided that she wanted to try something different. She wanted a different kind of job. And her boss essentially told her, who's going to hire you? A United States Senator. That's who. And she's wearing that shirt because that was the Cavs parade day she was going. She has, for the first time in her life, she has her own business cards, and she's not a secretary anymore. I interviewed Jane Pauley a couple years ago when her new book came out about what comes next in middle age, and she said that by 2014, the youngest baby boomers will have turned 50. And the question we face is, what am I going to do? Each of us faces this question. What am I going to do for the next 40 years? Speaking of menopausal whales, I love that. Did you know that the killer whale is the only other mammal that goes through menopause? And did you know that after menopause, she becomes the leader of the clan? And she lives for 20, 30, 40 years as the boss of everybody. You know what? We could have a postmenopausal woman be president of the United States. Oh, there I am. Tired, mommy Connie, holding my 10-month-old baby, Caitlin, on deadline. As you can see, the shower was yet to come. If I could talk to her, if I could reach back in time and talk to Connie, I would tell her 3 things. Number 1, get rid of the glasses. Number 2, you've got time. You got time. You got time to do all the things you want to do. It isn't going to come to an end at 35, at 45, at 55. So don't listen to that hype. As long as you wake up every morning with a renewed sense of curiosity, and you've got your own tribe of champions, men and women, you're going to be fine. You're going to get to do all you want to do, just not at the same time. And as long as you don't listen to that voice of no in your head, you're going to surprise yourself. The last thing I would want to say to her is, do not wait to be invited to make a difference in the world. I'm reminded of a dear friend who was an assistant editor at the Plain Dealer, and one morning I walked in, and I could tell she was so upset. She's standing there, and she's just stewing. And I walked up to her, and I said, what's the matter? And she pointed to a group of her male colleagues huddled in a corner, and she said, I'm trying to figure out why I'm not included in that conversation. And I put my hand on her back and said as gently as I could, I'm trying to figure out why you're waiting for the invitation. If women waited for the invitation, we still wouldn't have the right to vote. Remember Karin Sandstrom I told you about, the artist? This is my favorite piece of hers so far. She calls it Night Sky. I call it the monster under the bed. I love how the little boys invited him up to sit with them so they can become friends. I have figured out who that monster has been in my life. It's that voice of no. It's the one that says, who are you to think you're going to be able to be a columnist? Why would anyone care what you have to say? So this hangs over my desk, and now sometimes when I'm feeling a little nervous because I'm finishing up my first novel, I pull up an empty chair and I invite him to sit down with the understanding he's going to keep his negative viewpoints to himself. If I hear anything in my head, I immediately turn to that empty chair and say, what did I tell you? Nothing, not a word. Because I'm going to turn 60 next year, you understand, and I've got plans. And if anyone stands in front of me and thinks he's going to see right through me, I'm going to stop him in his tracks. I'm going to hold up my pretty fingernails, and I'm going to say, this, sir, is your new reality.